Ethan!
No, I didn't mean it like that.
Ethan Cross pushed open the cafe door and laughed loud enough for 3 tables to turn. Claire watched him move through the small crowd and saw his phone slide across his partner's palm. The image on the screen was unmistakable and the sight landed as betrayal. She did not think. Her mouth went dry and her hands tightened around the ceramic cup until the rim pressed into her palm. The conflict was immediate. A photograph on a phone, his grin, and the knowledge she had been lied to. Claire had come to that table to be invisible. She came to the cafe most mornings for a corner seat, a lukewarm latte, and the quiet rhythm of work at her laptop. Today the corner felt smaller. She kept her back to the room and read the headline on her screen while listening for the hiss of the milk steamer. The cafe smelled of coffee and lemon oil. She had sworn off dating after the slow, repeated promises from Ethan had ended in excuses and missed planes. She had told Maya, "I am done," and then learned how stubborn a habit giving up can be. Ethan moved to the counter and called to the barista, the voice light as if nothing had happened. He was the same man from last year's promises. Tidy hair, confident jacket, a watch he liked to show in sunlight. Claire remembered a dozen small things he once did that felt like care. Making her tea when she had a fever, leaving notes folded inside her satchel. Remembering those things now did not soften the photograph. The image on his phone showed him at a brunch table 2 weeks ago with a woman Claire had never met. And on Ethan's face in that photo was a look she recognized only as the one he'd used when he asked her to move in. The room tightened around Claire. She shifted in her chair and her scarf whispered on the wood. Her first emotion hardened into a second. Humiliation. She felt exposed in a room that had been her refuge. People glanced. A man at the next table smirked. A child pointed. Claire pressed both palms against her eyes and forced her breath to even out. Her hands trembled. She felt the shift from suspicion to shame as the people she had been practicing normal life around looked at her like she was a scene. Claire. Maya's voice broke the lock on her chest. Maya appeared at the door carrying a canvas tote and a weathered umbrella. She had been due for a later shift at a meeting and somehow arrived first. Maya slid into the seat opposite Claire with a speed that said she had seen the same screen. Is that him? Claire pulled her hands away and looked at Maya. The sight of her friend made the emotion move into anger. Yes, Claire, he walked in with her. She kept her voice steady and small. There was a short, hard silence. The barista, Sarah, paused mid-pour and looked up. Ethan straightened and caught Claire's eye across the room. He came over with a smile that felt like a practiced motion. He lifted his chin. He did not meet the shock in Claire's face with apology. He met it with a version of charm that had once disarmed arguments. He stopped by the counter where the espresso machine steamed. "Claire, Ethan, I didn't expect to see you here. You look well." He slid his phone in the direction of his partner, and then toward Claire in a move that read like a puncture rather than an explanation. No one spoke at first. The cafe had an open layout. People were close enough to hear. Claire felt the room ask questions with their faces. She could feel the heat at the base of her neck. She folded the napkin under her cup with fingers that left coffee ring marks on the paper. She had to decide quickly whether to speak or to vanish. Ethan crossed the small space between the counter and Claire's table. He stopped at the end of the long community bench, as if he owned a right to be there. "We had a great weekend," he said. "It was just brunch." His smile did not reach his eyes. He turned his body toward the room. "You should be happy for me, Claire." "I figured you'd want that for me." The attempt to frame his betrayal as her failing pushed the first major emotional tilt. Anger to disbelief. People muttered. The man with the smirk cleared his throat. A woman near the window looked down at her cup. Claire kept her eyes steady on Ethan. She felt her jaw clamp. She felt the dam shift inside her between arguing and walking out. She thought of the lists she'd made. No dates, no cake on Sundays, no giving him another chance. The lists had been a shield. The photo on Ethan's phone felt like someone tearing a corner from that shield. No sat 3 tables away, nursed his coffee, and read a paperback one, sleeve dog, eared at the spine. He had watched Ethan's entry with an attention that was quiet, not intrusive. At the moment Ethan leaned toward Claire with that practiced smile, No pushed his cup backward on the table and stood. He moved with small, non-performative steps that cut between the community bench and the counter without a showy gesture. No placed his forearm on the back of the chair next to Claire and kept his voice low. "Claire, are you all right?" The question was not dramatic. It was a steady check. Claire answered by moving. She closed her laptop and set her hands flat on the table. She remembered how her mother told her to keep her head high. She remembered giving Ethan a key and later finding excuses in his messages. The room was a loop of people observing. Maya leaned over and dropped a printed photograph on the table, the same image Ethan had shown. Claire picked it up with fingers that left smudges. The photograph was dated. Maya had pulled it from a screenshot stored in a folder she'd been saving when she suspected Ethan months ago. "I saved it, Maya. I thought you'd want to see it on your own terms." Maya's arrival and the physical paper shifted the dynamic. That was the first external event after the opening hook. It moved the story from private recognition to public proof. People saw the image on the napkin and looked from the paper to Ethan. The murmur rose. Ethan's smile thinned. He took 2 steps closer. "You shouldn't have this," he said to Claire, and then to the room. "This is private." His voice tightened on the word private. Claire stood faster than she planned. Her chair scraped the floor. She felt a quickness in her hands and a coldness at her mouth. Her voice came out sharper than she intended. "Private. You choose private choices and public consequences. Ethan?" His name like a punctuation mark. The sudden exchange moved the emotion from shame into confrontation. Patrons turned their bodies toward the middle of the cafe. Ethan's posture changed. He reached for his phone and tried to take the printed photograph from the table. "Give that back," he said. "Maya, what are you doing with this?" He looked around, expecting an ally in the room. Some heads turned away. No one stepped forward for him. "Claire, this isn't the place to—" "Ethan," Claire interrupted. "Not here. Not in front of everyone. You lied. You were traveling. You were moving toward me." She spoke quickly now, forcing the words out in short bursts. "You things we planned on." We. No leaned in slightly, palms visible on the tabletop. He was careful not to take over the scene. He set his voice low so only the table could hear. "Claire, you don't have to do this alone." His words were an action. A hand stayed at his side open. Claire felt the tone shift. Her mind split between clearing her chest and retreating into the lists that had kept her safe. The emotion moved again. Anger toward a thin relief at not being alone. Ethan's face reddened. "Claire, that's not what happened," he said quickly. "We were just friends. Stop making this worse." His hands fumbled for language that could keep control. The barista, Sarah, wiped a cup with a towel and set it down with a measured motion, so the motion did not add noise to the room. The cafe filled with a brittle quiet. Maya leaned forward. "Ethan, she has your messages and your name on the receipt from the bistro. Claire, you be working late every night last month." "That wasn't work calls." Her tone was direct. Her eyes met his without flinching. "You lied to her face, Ethan. You lied to all of us." Ethan's reply came faster. "You done to know anything, Maya?" He jabbed a finger at the paper. "This means nothing. You remaking stories where there are none." A few people at the counter stirred. One man muttered, "No. She has a receipt." That small voice shifted the room towards scrutiny. The argument escalated into back and forth lines that tightened the scene. "Ethan, Stop. Claire, you promised me a reason to stay. You never let me breathe. Ethan shot back. Claire, you made it impossible for me to. You made it impossible by not showing up. Claire, you me things and then cancelled them. You me I was your plan. The rapid exchange followed the requirement for a confrontation with several short lines. There were 5 quick turns. Claire, Ethan, Mia, Ethan, Claire. Each line was a short beat. People listened like they were holding their breath. No stayed silent until Sarah cleared her throat and walked over with the napkin, where Maya had left the printed phone screenshot. She touched the paper with fingertips that smelled faintly of citrus cleaner. Sarah set it where the counter light caught the glossy surface. I don't want trouble in here, Sarah. But folks should know when someone is using this space to lie to someone who comes here for peace. Her words were calm, but they added authority. The room turned fully toward Ethan. He looked around, his options narrowing. Ethan's jaw tightened. He shoved his hands into his pockets. His posture turned defensive. This is a misunderstanding. You should make accusations in public. He stepped back and the bench scraped. I'm leaving. His face was a mix of anger and something that might have once been sorrow. He pushed past a chair and out the door. When Ethan reached the doorway, his partner followed, face flushed and eyes lowered. The bell over the door chimed when they left. The room exhaled collectively. Claire felt her shoulders uncoil a fraction. The public clash had reached the peak and then cut away as quickly as a snapped wire. That peak matched the outline's climax. Ethan's exposed retreat. The aftermath settled into small human motions. Maya reached across and squeezed Claire's fingers. I am sorry, Maya, I should have told you sooner. Claire let Maya's hand stay in hers. She closed her eyes for a moment and then opened them. Her breathing slowed but remained uneven. She tasted metal at the back of her mouth from adrenaline. The emotional scene shifted again, from anger to an exhausted relief and a careful curiosity about what came next. No leaned back into his chair and smiled faintly in a way that was almost private. He smelled of cedar and rain. He did not offer philosophical lines. He one practical question, do you want to step outside? The offer came with no demand and no plan beyond that small motion out the door. Claire considered the caf, the faces, the coffee cups, the wet impression of a day that had tilted, and then looked at the sunlight pooling on the sidewalk. Claire folded her coat and reached for her satchel. Her fingers brushed the simple gold locket she kept closed as a habit. She tucked the locket under her shirt. She collected her cup and the printed photograph and stood. The room shifted to make a path. Sarah moved a chair and wiped a spot dry near the doorway. The caf seemed to move like a small, efficient machine making room for a private exit. Outside, the late morning had a sharpness that felt honest. Sunlight warmed the brick of the building, and a delivery truck hummed down the street. Claire let the air cool the flush on her face. She kept her hand close to Maya's for the first step and then dropped it when No stepped beside her. No walked at her pace. He did not fill the silence with easy talk. He kept his hands in easy view. You don't have to talk now. Walk if you want. Or sit. Whatever you choose. His voice matched his earlier steady presence. Claire felt the action of choosing again, but now it was tinged with something different. Cautious relief, the emotional arc had more changes, shame, anger, relief, curiosity, and now a fragile openness. Claire chose to walk. She let her steps find a slow rhythm beside No. She did not decide anything about love. She did not promise anything. She only took the measured decision to leave the caf with someone who had not demanded anything of her. Maya waved from the doorway and called, "Lunch later." Claire gave a tired smile and nodded. They walked past the bookstore with the front window full of postcards and stopped at the crosswalk. Claire tucked a stray curl behind her ear in the small nervous habit she had carried for years. No watched her hands and then looked at her face. "I saw what happened," he said quietly. I thought I should do something." No more, no less. His sentence contained a pause that was practical and not theatrical. Claire answered in a low voice, "Thank you, no." The name was a small, definite thing she could place in her mouth. She felt the last of the calf's tightness loosen in the back of her jaw. The decision she had made in the last beat was concrete. She had walked out the door and agreed to the company of someone steady. The chapter did not end with a new beginning announced or a vow. It ended with movement. No fell into step beside her, and they crossed the street together. The sun warmed Claire's scarf. She set the folded photograph inside her satchel like a weight that would not vanish, but could be carried differently now. The city sound filled the space between them. A bicycle bell, a delivery truck backing up, a dog barking once. Claire kept her hands visible and her shoulders open a fraction. She had not reclaimed anything grand. She had made one choice: to leave with someone whose kindness had been practical, not performative. At the curb, Claire paused and looked back once at the cafe window. The interior showed a scatter of people returning to their cups. Maya waved with an exaggerated, private grin. Sarah wiped the counter and met Claire's gaze with an expression that acknowledged complicity. Claire turned back and kept walking. No's hand hovered near the small of her back and then rested there for a single, steady beat. Claire accepted the touch the same way she accepted a borrowed umbrella on a rainy day, grateful, guarded, and aware that the shelter was temporary unless she chose otherwise. They moved down the sunlit block, and the chapter closed on the action of stepping forward, with the evidence folded away and the room behind them settling back into its pattern. The immediate clash had been resolved. The confrontation had ended with a man leaving, a friend revealing proof, and Claire choosing movement over retreat. The final image of the chapter is simple and concrete. Claire stepping down the sidewalk, a photograph in her bag, No walking at her side, and the bell of the cafe chiming behind them as the door swung closed. Claire saw him with his mouth on another woman before she had time to think. Betrayal arrived in a single, bright movement. Ethan Cross pressed his hand to the small of the woman's back and laughed in a way she had heard only once before. On a morning when a message had shown a different life than the one he had promised. She left the book in her lap and stood up so suddenly the table scraped the floor. People glanced. Claire kept her hands flat on the spine of a slim poetry collection and let the heat in her face go unused. She had come to the independent bookstore because words still steadied her hands. The bell over the door had sounded like an ordinary thing. She had not expected to see Ethan again. Inside, the poetry corner smelled of mildew and lemon oil from the shelves. The sight of him with the other woman made the page in her fingers useless. She thought of the phone image Ethan had slid across earlier that morning, an image she had not want to see but had not been able to ignore. And the two moments hooked together in a single accusation. Betrayal sat between the lines she was supposed to read, and it made her legs move without permission. When she stumbled out of the shop, the street felt too narrow. She walked faster and almost ran into a man who steadied her with two hands on her elbows. He did not let go until her pulse slowed under his calm. "Claire," he said. His voice had a low, steady quality that reached less for drama than for the fact of her name. She blinked, trying to pin him to a single memory. She remembered a satchel left on a cafe chair earlier that week. He was the man who had returned it. "You okay?" He asked again. "No," she said. "No, I'm not okay." Her words spilled out short and brittle. She did not look up at him at first. She kept one hand over the locket at her throat, as if the metal could hold the edges of whatever had torn. He tightened his grip on her elbow just a fraction. "Do you want to sit?" He offered. He did not ask for explanations. He did not rush toward pity. He simply noticed a locket, the trimmer in her fingers, her avoidance of eye contact. Those small, factual observations quieted the first stab of panic enough that she could breathe through it. No Mercer had a habit of noticing details other people missed. He had watched the crease at Claire's left eyebrow when she was careful, the way she folded her hands around a warm cup when she needed time. Now he watched her straighten her shoulders. "Claire," he said softly, "breathe." "We'll—" He stopped, letting the sentence hang while she chose the next step. His steady presence changed the immediate problem from an accusation in public to a practical question. What did she want to do next? Across town, her friend Maya arrived at Claire's apartment building with her phone open on a screenshot. The image showed Ethan and the woman at a lunch table, smiling at a camera Claire had not expected would ever catch them together. Maya stood in the doorway without knocking, because she knew Claire would not want the warning, "I saw it." Maya bluntly, "They posted it an hour ago." Ethan's got the nerve to be proud of it. Maya's voice carried quick heat. She had always moved through anger like a tool she used to cut through other people's illusions. "Maya, Claire." She let her fingers trace the threadbare strap of the leather satchel that had been returned to her that morning. He was in the poetry corner. He kissed her. The sentence was short and nailed itself to the room. Maya's mouth tightened. "Show me," she said. Maya set the phone on the counter and tapped. The message chain, the tagged photo, the casual comments from colleagues, each concrete piece pushed the betrayal beyond rumor and into evidence. Claire ran her thumb over the gold locket until the metal warmed. Maya paced the small kitchen in 2 quick steps and stopped in front of Claire. "You should say something," she said. "People will talk." Letting him do this without a response looks like acceptance. Claire looked at her friend and saw the familiar, furious logic that had once convinced her to cut ties with a roommate who had used rent money for bets. "I don't want a scene, Claire." Her voice was flat. She had learned to make decisions without theater. A scene won't change anything. Maya's jaw worked like she had a dozen tactically chosen words stored for this moment. "Then do the one thing that will matter. Speak once, in person. Tell him it's over. Don't let the rumor be the version of you outside." No waited on the worn stoop with the messenger bag hooked across his chest. He had followed at a respectful distance after he saw Claire leave the bookstore. Not because he intended to protect her from a man he had never met, but because he had noticed the way her hands had folded over the locket in the doorway. He slid the satchel back to the position on his knee and wrung his fingers on the strap while he considered his next move. When Maya stepped outside and said Claire's name, No straightened and kept his voice low. "If you were going out to confront him, I'll come with you," he offered. His phrasing made no demand of her. It simply placed an option on the table. Claire let them both speak, and then made the smallest decision she could. She would go to the neighborhood open mic later that evening and read something short. It was not a plan to humiliate Ethan or to create a spectacle. It was a place that asked for honest lines, and that drew the kind of audience who listened to words instead of gossip. Jonah, the organizer, knocked on her building that afternoon with a clipboard and the kind of easy confidence that suggested he had been running small shows for years. "You should read, Jonah. People will hear you. They'll hear how you put what happened into words. It's not a fight. It's a way to close it on your terms." Jonah's manner was direct. He paid for honesty in performance fees and coffee cups. Claire agreed, because the alternative felt like letting the story be written about her without her voice in it. She signed up for 5 minutes and told Jonah she would bring one piece. Maya drove with music off. She kept the velocity of her anger under control by counting red lights and tapping a finger on the dash. "If he comes, don't let him make it about him," she told Claire, as if she could hand over a script. No sat in the back seat with his hands open on his knees, a quiet, steady presence. He did not speak much in the car, but when he did his sentences was simple and aimed to steady. "Claire," he said once, "read the lines you wrote for yourself. Let them be the last word you give him." At the community hall the chairs were set in rows under hanging bulbs that hummed with a low electrical note. The open mic crowd was the kind of mixed group that paid attention to phrasing and to the people who took up time. Barristers, retired teachers, a man who sold handmade stools, 2 teenagers with sketchbooks. Claire sat with her hands folded around the paper. She would read and listened as 3 readers went before her. Each piece gave her a small blueprint for how to keep her voice clear and contained. Her pulse would climb and then settle with each transition from one reader to the next. Then Ethan walked in. He moved to the back of the room with a purposeful gait that carried a smile measured for an audience. Maya saw him first and hissed under her breath, "He's here," she said. "He's here to save face." Her body tightened. Jonah paused at the curtain and glanced at the sign up list. He had an expression that said he had seen this sort of interruption before. Ethan crossed the room with hands slightly raised in a public apology posture. He stopped 2 rows back and looked directly at Claire. "Claire," he said loudly enough for the room to hear, "can we talk?" The room shifted. Conversations quieted. Claire felt the way attention pooled like water toward a small hole. She stood up slowly and held the paper with both hands so the words would not crumble. "Not now, Ethan," she said. Her voice was steady and intentionally small. He took another step forward and placed both palms flat at his sides. "Claire, please. I messed up. I didn't mean..." A small chorus of murmurs rolled through the audience. No remained beside Claire with his shoulders squared but his voice low. "You don't have to answer him if you don't want to," he said. His sentence was a rule, not advice, protection offered without dramatics. Maya leaned forward and hissed, "Don't let him do the dramatic thing." Claire felt the pull of 2 offers. One from a man asking for forgiveness, and the other from the room giving her a stage. She folded the paper once, twice, and kept it against her palm. Ethan's words came faster then, aimed at the small crowd as much as at Claire. "I didn't tell anyone this was happening," he said. "Claire, I made a mistake. We can talk in private." Maya slammed the side of her fist into her open palm. "He's performing for them," she spat. "He's making this about his remorse, so everyone will like him more." Jonah cleared his throat from the stage doorway and walked into the aisle with the calm of someone who refused to be bought by spectacle. He stopped between Ethan and the stage and asked, "Ethan, did you pay to bring this here tonight?" The question landed sharp and open. Ethan's face changed, and the movement there answered Jonah without words. He paled a shade, then forced a laugh. "No, Jonah, I didn't pay anyone. I'm here because I wanted to apologize." Jonah's eyes hardened in a way Claire recognized from his organizer manner. He had a line he would not cross. You offered a fee for a private slot earlier tonight, Jonah." His voice was measured. "I need to know if this is performance or apology." Claire's chest tightened in a way that translated into a quick exhale. The room leaned forward in the same moment. "Maya, if he paid, it's a show. If he didn't, then he'll have to own up." "Claire, say what you were going to say." Her words were a push that left no room for dithering. Claire walked to the stage and set her palms on the mic stand. She did not shout. She did not beg. She read 3 short paragraphs she had written that morning. Specific images, dates, and 1 clear sentence addressed to Ethan. "Ethan," she read, "I trusted you with morning coffee and with things you promised me in private. You chose to do otherwise. I will not audition again for your sympathy." Her voice held plain facts. There was no theatricality. Ethan moved forward then, hands flaring in an attempt to gather compassion. "Claire, please," he began. Jonah's hand lifted. "Ethan, Jonah, the room will decide if that apology is for her or for attention." Maya stood and said, "Ethan, did you offer a payment to run this like a per moment?" There were 3 rapid exchanges between Jonah, Maya, and Ethan that made the question heavier. "Jonah," Ethan denied. Maya pressed with a screen she had shown him earlier on her phone. The back and forth was quick and staccato. "Did you?" Maya demanded. "No," Ethan insisted. "Yes," Jonah countered, holding out his phone with a message that showed a cash transfer screenshot. "You offered it this afternoon." A jolt of something hard and practical moved through Claire. The public apology was staged. The context shifted in a single concrete reveal. The betrayal had not only been about the kiss. It had become a calculation in which Ethan attempted to control a story. Claire felt a rush of anger that demanded a physical outlet. She dropped the paper on the mic stand and walked off the stage without shouting. Her feet were steady despite the heat in her face. Ethan reached for her hand in the doorway, as if to stop her. "Claire, please." He sounded smaller now. "Please, let me explain." Claire did not step back. She did not take his hand. She looked at him and said, "Ethan, you could have told me. You chose to let someone else tell me your story." Her statement was a precise sentence that did the work of closure rather than being a flourish. No move to stand at Claire's side in the doorway. He did not block Ethan so much as created a stable line between Claire and the man who had tried to script her pain. "Claire, no," quietly. "You decide. You don't owe him a demonstration." The words were not a lecture. They were permission. Maya came up, her fingers nervy as she shoved her phone into Claire's hand. "Look at this, Maya." The message chain showed Ethan discussing optics, what to say, who to place, until Jonah had called him out. There was a specific line where Ethan joked about making it look sincere. Claire's shoulders dropped in a way that was almost invisible. The reveal removed a question she had been carrying. She folded the paper back into her pocket and took off her coat. "Ethan," she said once, and the name sat like a legal notice. "Leave. Don't contact me again." He opened his mouth and then closed it. The room hummed with the sound of people inhaling and deciding which side they wanted to stand on. Ethan left without another word. Outside the hall, the night air felt sharp enough to sting the skin on Claire's cheeks. Jonah walked her to the building's small side garden and handed her a cup of tea without asking her to explain. "You handled that well," he said. "Not everyone can hold a room like that and still keep their hands as steady as you did." His compliment was practical. It acknowledged control. Maya folded her arms and scowled at the direction Ethan had taken. He wanted applause. "Maya." He tried to buy it. "No, nothing for a long beat." "Claire," he said finally. "What do you want to do tomorrow?" The question was not rhetorical. It required an answer that was more than anger. Claire looked at the steaming cup Jonah had given her, and then at the folded note in her coat pocket. A small paper Jonah had slipped her earlier with the Times and a calm line. "Read when ready." She opened the note and read 3 words he had written to steady her. "You choose it." She laughed a little and surprised herself. The sound was a short, practical exhale. "Tomorrow, I will go to the CAF, and I will finish the contract on the project I started," she said. "I will not let him determine whether I publish what I write. I will let the work speak for me." Her decision was not a rallying speech. It was an inventory of the next concrete steps. Work, the contract, control. Maya squeezed her shoulder. "Good. And Claire, tonight, lock your phone if you have to. Don't look for more confirmation of him. That's what he wants." Her sentence had the bluntness of someone who measures harm and removes access. Claire nodded. "I want look," she promised. Her lips pressed together like a small seal. They walked back up the path together with Jonah and Noah falling into an easy, practical silence. At the apartment window the next morning, a steaming cup sat on the sill under the soft dawn light. The note from Noah lay beside it, folded twice. Claire made tea and set the cup down where the sun hit the rim. She opened the note and read his words. "One step. One morning at a time." The sentence was no grand vow. It was an offered measure, a small timetable. She touched the locket at her throat and let the metal warm against her skin. She had set a boundary in public the night before. She had refused spectacle and exposed the staging instead. The chapter of drama that Ethan tried to write for her had been cut out by plain facts, and by her refusal to let him turn her into an object of pity. She folded the note, set the cup down, and chose the slow, careful step forward she had promised herself. The final image of the chapter was as exact as the morning. Claire standing at the windowsill, the folded paper beside the steaming cup, and the street below empty except for a delivery truck turning the corner. That small ordinary action, she put the cup back on the saucer and walked to her desk, closed the immediate conflict and left a clear, concrete opening for what came next. Claire gripped the iron handrail as Ethan slid into the passenger seat of a black hatchback with a woman laughing at his side. Betrayal hit Claire like a physical shove. She could feel her fingers go numb around the railing and her voice thin when she called his name. "Ethan," she said, and the sound carried across the cobbled lane before a horn cut it off. The car's door clicked shut. The woman leaned in and kissed Ethan on the cheek. The moment made the problem concrete. Ethan had been with another woman in public, and Claire had just caught them leaving the bookshop steps. She pushed off the railing and walked toward the car, shoes scuffing on the stone. People on the steps watched but did not move. Claire's jaw tightened. She kept her steps measured because she had to keep control of what came next. The immediate conflict, public betrayal, forced her choice. Confront him here or let him go. She crossed the lane and faced the closed car door. Claire, the name came from across the street. No stepped forward from the shadow of a lamppost, hands tucked into his jacket pockets. He had been there watching, and his face did not change when he met the woman's smile. Noah's presence briefly shifted Claire's anger into something sharper. Relief that someone else had seen it, and a new uncertainty about how much to expose. Ethan rolled down the window half an inch. "Claire, it isn't what you think," he said. His voice was thin and practiced. He used the same phrasing he'd used once before when a message had arrived on her phone, an excuse built to move fast and explain nothing. "It looks exactly like what it is, Claire." Her voice didn't shake. She his name to hold it steady. People nearby watched their exchange like a small play. No crossed the street alone and stopped 2 paces from the car. He looked at Ethan, then at Claire. "You need to answer her, Ethan." Noah's voice was low but firm. He did not say more than necessary. The man in the car shrugged. The woman in the passenger seat smiled and mouthed, "Sorry," a gesture that made Claire's throat close. The car pulled away before Ethan could anything beyond a clipped apology. Claire watched the taillights shrink into the dusk. Her shoulders eased and then recoiled. The departure left space for action. Betrayal had been revealed in the open, and she had proof in sight, but it left questions about whether it was a single mistake or part of a pattern. No followed her to the corner without asking, "Do you want me to come with you?" he asked. He never reached for her, only offered the option. Claire looked at him. "Yes," she said, "Maya's waiting." "I want to talk to her first." She kept walking toward the diner 2 blocks from the bookshop. They moved through the narrow lane and toward a late-night diner whose neon sign hummed. The diner smelled of frying bread and coffee. Claire sat in a booth while her friend Maya appeared 10 minutes later, breathless from running. Maya sat down and took in Claire's face quickly. "What happened?" "Maya," he left with her on the steps. "Claire." She slid her phone across the table and showed the single photograph she'd managed to take as the car pulled away. Ethan's profile, the woman's braid, the hatchback's license plate. Maya touched the screen. "We should document it properly. Maya, we need timestamps, records." "You didn't hear it from a rumor. You saw it." Her voice moved from shock into method. Maya had always been practical this way. She pulled a small spiral notebook from her bag and began to list actions. "Call the number. Check receipts," asked the barista. Claire let Maya outline steps while she folded her hands around a cup to stop them from shaking. Noah waited outside the diner while Claire and Maya spoke. After a few minutes, he slipped into a booth and ordered black coffee. Lucy, the bookshop barista, appeared at the counter with a folded envelope, offered like an apology. "I think this dropped near the steps, Lucy." She handed the envelope to Noah, who glanced at Claire and slid it across the table to her. Claire opened the envelope with fingers that felt clumsy. Inside was a dated receipt and a typed name on a card. A business address on the low, rise block near the river. The printed receipt had a timestamp and a security code marker. The receipt was not an accident. It implied meetings arranged on purpose. Claire felt a shift. Anger receded into methodical alarm. This might be bigger than a single evening. Lucy found this near the steps.
Claire, yes.
The woman dropped it when she left. Did he come back? Lucy's voice lowered. She avoided looking at Ethan's name as if saying it aloud would make the situation worse. Claire folded the paper into her palm. She could leave it folded and hidden, but Maya's list had already pushed her toward action. No, can you check the address? She asked, just to see if there's anything obvious. She sounded like someone scheduling a plumber, and the detachment steadied her. No nodded. I can go now. He said, if you want, I can drive. The offer arrived without pressure. Claire watched the way he held his coffee. He kept his hands open on the table. That small steadiness was the kind of kindness she had sworn off, but tonight it felt like a lifeline. He drove them in his old truck before dawn. Concrete and metal slid by under the windshield while they rode through streets that smelled of rain, washed asphalt. At the low, rise office block No parked 2 cars down and they walked up the sidewalk. Claire kept the receipt in the pocket of her coat like a map. They watched a security guard let a man in with a leather briefcase. Claire's breath shortened. That's him, she said, and pointed. No raised his chin. He took a single photograph with his phone without saying a word. The man had Ethan's posture. He moved across the lobby and into an elevator. A woman followed. Claire's stomach contracted. They left before any confrontation. No's hands found the small silver watch on his wrist. I'll check the records at the front desk quietly. He did not ask for permission. He assumed responsibility. Claire felt guilt and gratitude overlap, an emotion that tightened her chest and made it harder to speak. At midday, they returned to the glass-fronted lobby and waited. When Ethan emerged from the elevator with his coat on, Claire stepped forward. The lobby smelled of lemon cleaner and elevator oil. People stopped and watched as Claire blocked Ethan's path. Ethan, she said. He looked surprised to see her there. We need to talk now. Claire's words landed. They had both the cadence of someone who had rehearsed and the sharpness of someone who would not be postponed. Ethan's face was controlled. Claire, please. I saw you on the bookshop steps. Claire cut in. You left with her. Lucy found an envelope. There are receipts with times and addresses. What do you call this, Ethan? Her sentences came quick but clean. Ethan swallowed. He avoided her eyes. It was nothing. It's not what you think. His hands made a small, involuntary movement toward his coat pocket, as if to find a business card. No stepped up beside Claire. Don't tell her it's nothing. Ethan, he said. Tell her the truth. Noah's voice tightened at the last word. He met Ethan's eyes and did not break contact. Ethan's answers came faster now, as if speed could mend the break. Claire, I work with her. It's business. We had to meet for a client handoff. I swear he looked to know. You of all people should know this isn't Ethan. Claire, stop. Say one true sentence. Her voice did not waver. She used his name to pull him toward honesty. Ethan paused. For a second, Claire saw him search his memory for a line he'd used before. Then he stepped back and breathed in. I slept with her once. He said, it was months ago. I told you it was over. I thought it was over. His words tumbled out. They lacked the polish of a rehearsed excuse. Claire's face tightened. She took 3 steps forward. Months ago he said the same thing. Maya from behind her, voice low and cutting. Maya had followed them from the diner and stood now at Claire's shoulder. You loved her last winter. Maya, Claire, you were leaving. Which version is true, Ethan? Maya's words acted like a lens that focused the argument. Ethan's mouth opened and closed. He tried to push a hand toward Claire's arm and she recoiled. Claire, please. He tried again. This time there were 3 rapid back and forth lines between them. "Claire, listen to me," Ethan's tone pleaded. "Ethan, answer her now." Maya demanded. "It happened once. Then again. I told you before." Ethan looked at No for help and found only hard, patient attention. "No, Ethan, stop talking in fragments. Tell us the timeline." His words were deliberate. His eyes did not blink. Ethan's shoulders slumped. He gave a sequence, dates, meetings, late nights that had become excuses. He admitted the receipt belonged to a billing meeting that turned private. He admitted one thing he had not, that the other woman had been compensated, which implied premeditation to Claire in the form of organized meetings. The new detail shifted Claire's sense of the betrayal from an impulsive error to a planned pattern. Claire listened without interrupting. Each new fact altered the shape of what she had to decide. Anger shifted into a cold, practical clarity. She needed to protect herself and any plans Ethan might have been making that affected her. "I don't want your apologies in the lobby," she said finally. "I want the truth documented so I can protect what's mine." She set a boundary and spoke like someone closing an account. Ethan tried to apologize again and then left, shoulders bowed as if carrying a heavy sack. The crowd in the lobby dispersed, but the sense of exposure lingered. Claire stood with Maya and No. The 3 of them were a small island of purpose. No suggested they collect evidence. Maya suggested filing calls and copies of receipts. Lucy had already offered the envelope and a witness statement about the woman leaving the steps. Claire agreed to each practical step. Their plans moved like a checklist rather than a speech. This was how Claire wanted to act, through decisions and paperwork, not declarations. Later that afternoon, Lucy texted a photograph to Claire. The image showed Ethan entering a low-rise building with the woman. A security camera had caught them at 9:12 a.m. The file name included a date stamp. Claire felt a tightening in her chest. Then the tightening eased into a methodical resolve. This new evidence was a twist that made earlier denials impossible to sustain. Claire and No drove back to the cafe in silence. Words felt unnecessary. The truck's engine hummed beneath them. No parked and pulled his cap lower. "You did the right thing going after him." "No." He kept his voice plain. "I couldn't not go," Claire answered. "If I had to seen them, I'd have had to live with doubt forever." Her hands found the worn leather of her satchel, and they went into the small pocket where she kept the locket. She reached inside and folded the receipt so it would fit. No watched her do this without speaking. He had offered help from the start and had done the small, steady things that make crisis manageable. Driving, taking pictures, talking to witnesses. Those details mattered to Claire more than any grand gesture. That evening, they were back in the warm light of the Nashville cafe, where Claire had come for comfort. The barista poured slow coffee and the room felt ordinary in the way that ordinary places do after a day of upheaval. Claire folded the receipt into the locket and closed it. The action felt like filing a claim, small, concrete, final. No sat across from her, and for a long time neither of them spoke. The cafe hummed with conversation. A clock over the counter clicked second by second. Claire put the locket on the table and set her hand over it. She did not look at his face at first, only listened to the cup cool beside her fingers. "You didn't have to do all of that." Claire slowly, "I know." No replied, "But I wanted to. You me to be there and I came." His voice was steady. He did not add softenings or promises. He listed what he had done the way someone reads a small inventory. Maya came in a few minutes later to file copies with Claire. Lucy waved from behind the counter and handed over a written note listing the time. She saw the woman drop the envelope. The 3 of them compiled what they had: photos, receipts, a witness statement, and Noah's note about the license plate. Each item felt like a plank in a bridge across the night's damage. Claire folded the documents and slid them into her satchel. When she did, she felt a new shift inside her. The rawness of betrayal gave way to a cautious quiet. It was not healing yet. It was not a promise of the future. It was a preparation for a future with fewer surprises. She had moved from shock to action to a slow, practical calm. No stood to leave. He hesitated at the table, hands deep in his pockets. "Do you want me to walk you home?" he asked. The offer was simple and did not demand an answer that would mean anything like a commitment. Claire looked at him and then at the locket on the table. She picked it up and slid the receipt inside one last time. The metal closed with a small click. She stood and put the locket around her neck. "No," she said. "Thank you for coming tonight." Her voice was low but firm. He smiled in a way that was both patient and relieved. "Anytime," he said. "Call me if you need anything tomorrow." He kept his words practical. He did not place expectations. The bell above the cafe door jingled as they stepped into the evening. Claire walked down the street with her satchel across her shoulder and the locket resting at her collarbone. She did not look back at the bookshop or the office buildings. She did not need to. The concrete actions she had taken, evidence documented, witnesses recorded, boundaries set, had settled the night's crisis into a set of next steps. That was enough for now. At the corner, No paused. He looked at Claire and said quietly, "Rest tonight." "We'll finish the rest tomorrow," she nodded. Claire felt a last small flicker of emotion. Resentment eased into relief, and relief folded into guarded hope. She did not claim a sweeping new start. She only allowed herself to loosen her grip on the railing of the evening, to walk forward with the locket warm against her skin. As she stepped under the lamplight, she folded her fingers over the metal and whispered, more to herself than to anyone else, "This is final for me." She turned a key in her pocket, opened her front door, and closed it behind her with a steady hand. Claire stopped on the top step and bent to pick up the box. The cardboard was clean except for a round smear of dirt and a single Polaroid tucked under the lid flap. She slid the photo free and felt suspicion tighten behind her ribs the way cold makes fingers numb. The picture showed her kitchen table under the lamp, the locket on the tablecloth, taken from just outside the window. Claire stared at the Polaroid, every muscle alert. She touched the paper with one fingertip and found a thread of the same chain she always wore around her neck. She did not call out. The street was empty and the building's porch light hummed. She stepped back from the door and pressed her palm against the wood to steady herself. She lifted the box and carried it inside by the corners, mindful of fingerprints. The apartment smelled of cooling coffee and lemon cleaner. She set the package on the kitchen counter and closed the door with her shoulder, then reached for her phone. Her thumb hovered over the screen before she tapped Noah's name. "No." Her voice came out close, small. "There's a box on my doorstep. A Polaroid inside. Someone was at my window." Noah's line clicked alive within a minute. "I am on Willow. I'll be there in 8. Lock the door and don't touch anything." He kept the instruction clipped but steady. His name, Claire, at the end, and the single syllable sounded like a single held breath. She obeyed. She locked the deadbolt, pulled the curtains closed, and paced from the kitchen to the living room while the Polaroid lay on the counter. Suspicion pushed her to check the balcony light, the latch on the back window. Claire ran a hand through her hair and then folded her hands around a mug she had not poured. Her pulse moved under her fingers. When Noah arrived, he took in the apartment with quick, practical sweeps. He crouched at the counter and examined the Polaroid without touching the back. "They took this from outside your window," he said. "See the angle here. The photo lines up with your lamp." He kept his voice low but direct. "Whoever did this wanted me to know they were here. Claire." She named the feeling aloud because she needed the concrete shape of it. "I thought I was done with surprises like this." "Not again." The words landed and wobbled. Her jaw clenched. Noah nodded and rubbed his thumb along the chain on the thread that lay on the counter. "You did the right thing calling me, Claire. We'll call Officer Ramirez and then decide." He sounded careful in a way that made Claire want to believe him. Officer Ramirez arrived in uniform with a flashlight and a notepad. He took the Polaroid, turned it over with gloved hands, and asked Claire the same questions twice in different words. When was the last time you locked the window? Who else has a key? Does anything else feel different? He wrote while saying them. Claire answered tightly. The time she had left the apartment, the errands she had run, the names of the two friends who held her spare key. Ethan's name because it came out as part of the record and because she could not avoid it. When she said Ethan, her voice thinned and the air around the phrase carried a memory she had already tried to pin down. The memory came back precise. The late afternoon when she saw him with his mouth on another woman's cheek. She could see the street light catching his laugh and the way his hand had rested on the woman's back. Saying Ethan's name made the shame return as a physical ache at the base of her throat. Noah's jaw tightened once. He had heard the story before, but he stayed present now. Officer Ramirez looked from Claire to the picture and then toward the window. We have had a few reports in this block, he said. Someone's been casing apartments where people live alone and taking things. We'll file a report. We'll check cameras. He wrote the case number in a stiff hand and slid a business card across the counter. After Ramirez left with a promise to call if there was any forensic match, Claire and Noah moved through the apartment, searching for signs of more loss. Lena arrived mid-morning, carrying a travel mug and the exact impatience of someone who owned half the block's gossip. She dropped to the couch and took in Claire's face with quick eyes. You looked like you might hit someone. Lena. She always spoke bluntly to cut through Claire's protective edges. What happened? Claire set the Polaroid on the coffee table and pointed at the thread. This was on my doorstep last night. There was a thread from my locket. My window was pried open this morning and the locket is gone. She the last part slowly. Lena's face closed for a second. Ethan. She guessed before Claire could say anything. I saw him in the alley, Claire. He had his car there. He looked like he'd just left somewhere. Noah sat forward. Where did you see him, Lena? He asked. His question was clipped. He wanted specifics, not speculation. 2 blocks over by the bookshop. He waved at someone and then slipped off down Willow. I thought nothing of it then. Lena set her mug down with a soft thud and fished her phone from her bag. I am getting the security footage from the cafe. If anyone is in question, we'll see it. They walked to the cafe door together, and Lena ducked into the back room, where the manager kept a small archive of videos. The footage loaded on Claire's phone, and they crouched around the screen. On it, patrons moved like a normal morning until a dark silhouette appears at the edge of the frame, following Ethan as he stepped out. Claire stared until the silhouette matched Ethan's shape, and then moved past him into a narrow alley. The figure wore a hood and kept low. The screen showed them disappear into daylight and then nothing. Claire's hands went cold against the phone. She could not tell whether the person was friend or predator. Pause it. No. He tapped the playhead and scrolled frame by frame. Lena froze the frame where the silhouette veered toward the back of the cafe. There's a hand on Ethan's shoulder. Whoever that was had contact with him. Claire's suspicion turned into a sharper, hollow fear. She leaned back and pressed her palms over her eyes, counting her breath. The action calmed her for a moment. Then she remembered the Polaroid. Then the missing locket. The fear threaded through her throat to her hands. She felt suddenly small and very exposed. We need to find out who that is. No, Ethan's behavior doesn't explain all of it. Someone wanted you to know they'd been inside your home. He kept the word, wanted, plain and clinical, as if containing it might stop it from growing. They returned to the apartment and split tasks. Lena called mutual friends and the cafe manager to canvass their footage. Noah went through Claire's hallway with the flashlight again, testing locks and peering at the window frames. Claire watched him move. She watched his hands, the way he leaned into the light, the steady set of his shoulders. The observation anchored her. Around noon, Lena pulled footage from a different camera and replayed a longer clip. This time a shadow passed behind Ethan just after he left the cafe door. The shadow moved quickly toward Willow Street and then vanished down an alley that led to an old florist warehouse. Claire's throat closed. They went this way. Lena. She scaled the video with a finger. Look. Right there. Follow the alley. She did not wait for consent. I'm heading there now. No. You coming? I'll go with you. No, without hesitation. Claire, stay here. Officer Ramirez, he put an extra patrol by the block tonight. He Claire's name like an order that came from concern. Claire hesitated. I am coming, she said. Her voice had a thin, resolute edge. She put on a jacket and threaded her fingers through the worn strap of her satchel. She felt the absence of the locket like a hollow where a coin had been removed. They drove the block in Lena's car with the windows down against the humid air. The alleyways smelled of cut flowers and old cardboard. The florist warehouse stood on the corner, a rusted roller door scarred with paint. The building's windows were dark, and some had chains across them. A delivery sign swung on a loose hinge. No and Lena parked 2 cars down and walked up silently. Claire's heart ratcheted in her chest. Her palms were slick on the satchel strap. She kept telling herself they would see nothing, that they'd follow a lead and come away with a cleared name. The story in her head refused to settle into that neat line. They slipped through a gap in the chain, link fence, and moved toward the rusted door. No signaled for silence with one finger. Claire's shoes scuffed the gravel. She felt the night press close and heard her own breathing loud in her ears. No pushed the door a crack and peered inside with his phone light. The beam cut across a room stacked with dried wreaths and buckets. In the corner, someone had dragged a tarp over a pile of boxes. A smell of rot and old roses rose from the floor. Claire's mouth tasted metallic. They stepped inside, boots whispering over concrete. Lena kept one hand on the phone camera to record. The room was colder than the street, and the light picked out dust motes like sprinkles. The tarp shifted as if something underneath had been recently moved. Someone moved in the shadow at the far end of the warehouse. A masked figure blocked the exit and stepped forward with quick, jerky motions. Noah's hand went to the flashlight and then to Claire's wrist. He pulled her back behind a stack of crates. The masked figure threw a bundle down at their feet and lunged for the side door. Claire stumbled forward when the bundle spilled open on the concrete. Inside were small photographs, a single blood-stained receipt folded in a corner, and a handful of mementos, charm bracelets, a ticket stub, a child's crayon drawing. Claire recognized her handwriting on a torn margin. The masked person ducked into the night. No grabbed for a piece of evidence, but Lena blocked his hand. Don't touch, she hissed. She panned the camera toward the exit where the figure had escaped, and then back to the scattered items. Claire picked up the receipt with gloved fingers that Lena had handed her. The blood on the paper was old and brown at the edges. The receipt listed a florist shop name and an address that matched the location. Claire ran her thumb along the printed numbers until the small headline stood out. Delivery to Willow Street, account ending 22147. Her breath came out tight. No called Officer Ramirez on speaker and gave a clipped description. He read the receipt information aloud, and then the case number from the earlier report. Ramirez them to secure the scene and to wait 2 more minutes so he could get backup. Claire sat on an overturned crate and folded her hands into her knees. The warehouse door slatted open and red and blue lights pooled on the floor. Ramirez's voice was a clear presence as officers stepped in and began to photograph the pile of items and bag them. Claire felt a phase move within her from panic into clarity. Her hands stopped trembling and she began to line up what she needed to say. She Ramirez what she knew. The Polaroid, the missing locket, Ethan's presence near the bookshop, the silhouette on the footage. Lena handed Ramirez the footage link. No pointed out scuff marks on the loading ramp. Each concrete detail made the report heavier and more real. Ramirez spoke to Claire in short sentences and asked for names and places again for the official record. Who else knows about the locket? Who have you been with this week? He looked at her with the directness of a civic duty. Claire answered. She named Lena, the CAF staff, the bookshop clerk. She named Ethan when the name fit. Saying his name aloud in that room felt like dropping a stone in dark water. The echo made the officers look up and exchange a look. No watched Claire while Ramirez worked. He kept one hand at the small of her back, a light presence she could feel without thinking. Claire felt protected in a way that did not fold her, like a steady hand on the small of a doorway while you decide whether to open it. When the officers sealed the evidence bags and read the receipt under their lamps, one of them looked at Claire. This receipt is old. Miami. Someone's been keeping mementos from many apartments. We might be looking at a serial case. Keep a list of everything missing and any odd visitors. He paused. And stay somewhere else tonight if you can. Claire considered his suggestion. The idea of sleeping elsewhere felt like admitting defeat, like handing the night to the person who had done this. She thought of the empty bedside table and the space where her locket had sat. She felt a stubbornness rise, but it was tempered by the ache in her chest. She made a choice. I am not leaving my apartment until I have a plan, she said. Her voice was steady and small, but I will not be alone in it. No will stay with me. Lena will check in. Officer Ramirez will toggle the patrol on our block. We'll make it harder to get at me. We'll make this expensive for whoever's doing it. Noah squeezed her shoulder. Lena's eyes were warm with fierce agreement. Ramirez nodded and gave Claire a paper with the detective's contact number. If anything happens, call. And if you see Ethan again, tell me. Claire thought about Ethan's face. How he had laughed in the street, and the way he depressed his hand to the small of another woman's back. She also thought about the masked figure who had dropped the evidence, and the receipt with a florist's name. Two images sat in her mind like two different cuts of film showing the same scene. Back at the apartment, Claire spread the photographs and the mementos on her kitchen table. She ran her fingers over ticket stubs and a child's crayon heart that had her initials on the corner. She held each item up to the light and tested whether the small things could become a map. She found, beneath the crumpled papers, a folded scrap of stationery. It was thin and smelled faintly of old perfume. On the scrap, in a hurried scrawl, was a single line. You keep what you are told to keep. Stop looking and what you love stays safe. Claire's mouth went dry. She slid the note into her palm and felt the edges of the paper like a new weight. The warning moved her from fear into resolve. The fear that had vibrated in her hands became a focused plan. She stood and walked to the window that had been pried open. She stared at the latch and at the tiny chip in the sill. She placed her free hand over the spot where the locket had lain and imagined tracing the route it had taken away from her life. She felt the ache in her throat turn into something she could act on. No packed a small bag. I'll be here tonight, he said. I'll keep watch. We'll go through contacts in the morning and call the florist on the receipt. He spoke with a clarity that helped Claire sort priorities. Lena stayed too, pulling her laptop onto the couch and opening the footage they'd already downloaded. She texted the CAF manager for more timestamps and messaged mutual friends to ask who had seen Ethan that morning. She kept a list of names on the screen. Before the officers left, Ramirez came back and placed a hand on Claire's shoulder. You did everything right, Ms. Bennett. Keep a list of missing items. Call us if anything else shows up on your doorstep. We're rerunning a trace on the receipt and the florist. Claire watched the red and blue lights fade down Willow Street and then closed the door. She set the scrap of stationery on the table and folded her hands around a mug of tea that went cold in her grip. Her breathing evened out. She did not sleep that night. She sat at the kitchen table with the evidence spread like a constellation and made a plan. She would call the florist in the morning. She would make a record of everything missing. She would ask Lena to get more footage. She would not let the person who had violated her home know where she would go next. At dawn, Claire folded the small note into her palm and walked to the police tape still slung at the warehouse door. No came with her and squeezed her hand once before she stepped forward to talk to the detective. She felt a careful steadiness settle in her shoulders. The choice she had made to follow the trail rested like a small stone in her pocket and kept her grounded. The morning air on Willow Street smelled of cut grass and rain that had not yet come. No one knocked as she crossed the threshold of her apartment that morning. She placed the Polaroid back on the counter and then slid the scrap of stationery into her satchel beside her keys. She paused and ran a finger along the edge of the kitchen window one last time, feeling the nick in the wood where someone had forced a hand. Claire locked the deadbolt and walked out with Noah and Lena behind her. She held the note between her fingers for a moment and then folded it deeper into her palm. She stepped toward the street with a plan forming, a list of names, an address to call, a place to start tracing the people who had touched her life without her permission. The chapter closes with Claire walking toward the police car lights and the warehouse steps, the scrap of stationery pressed into her palm and the receipt's numbers in her head, ready to turn fear into action. Dawn confrontation, the final choice. Claire reached for her front door key and stopped because a silhouette sat on the stoop beneath the hallway light. Suspicion tightened her breath before she realized the man had Ethan Cross's profile and a folded Polaroid in his hand. Claire, Ethan, voice flat. And the single name landed between them like an accusation. She held the keys out as if they might be a thin shield. Within seconds, the argument she'd been avoiding for weeks, proof, betrayal, and the photographs, pressed at her throat. Suspicion is what made Claire step back onto the landing instead of unlocking the door. She kept her shoulders square and her voice steady because she had rehearsed this moment once, too. A dozen times since she had seen him on the bookshop steps with another woman. "What are you doing here, Ethan?" she asked. The question was a test and a promise, an invitation for truth or another lie. Ethan folded the photograph and lifted it as if to show it, then let his hand fall. "I need you to look at this," he said. He would not meet her eyes. His refusal to meet her drew a new line across Claire's anger. Anger rose like a quick flame beneath her ribs. She moved closer until the light hit the faint scar over her left eyebrow and he flinched. Maya's door opened across the hall before Claire could answer, "Is everything okay?" Maya voiced tight as the chain on her door. She stood in a robe, hair pinned up, 2 small garbage bags at her feet. Maya always kept her keys in the same pocket, always had a pot of jasmine tea on, and she did not look surprised, only alarmed. The presence of another neighbor changed the balance. The conversation shifted from private to public. Ethan stood up. "I didn't mean for you to find out like this," he said. You never what, Ethan?" Claire cut in. "You never told me you were meeting her in the afternoon. You never told me you were the reason my kitchen photo showed up in someone's mailbox." She spoke quickly to keep the words from turning to pleading. Ethan's jaw tightened. "You saw me at the cafe with Anna, Claire." "It wasn't what you think." He tried to hand her the folded Polaroid. Claire stepped back and the paper hit the stair with a small, hard sound. Maya crossed to the stair rail and crouched to pick up the photo. She opened it with careful fingers and passed it to Claire. On the Polaroid was a corner of Claire's kitchen table under the lamp, the same picture from the midnight delivery, and a shadowed corner where paint had peeled. The image was recent. The paper had a faint curl from humidity. Claire felt a change inside her. Suspicion blew into anger and then into a small, brittle panic. She forced her mouth to form practical words. "Who gave you this, Ethan? Who ordered these prints?" Ethan touched his forehead, then looked at Maya. "I didn't order them. I found that picture on my office desk. I panicked. I thought maybe..." Claire Someone is messing with both of us. I came to talk, his voice dropped. The confession shifted Claire's anger partly into confusion. The first emotion shift had already happened, suspicion to anger to confusion. Maya kept watching. If someone is stalking her, they used the same paper for copies yesterday at the print shop downstairs, she said. She surprised them both. Maya always noticed the small things. Missing mail, a neighbor's light left burning. She stood up, and the robe fell away from her shoulder. Sam at Evergreen Prints mentioned a batch on heavy stock. He irregular asked for duplicates last week. Noah arrived at the cafe an hour later as they had agreed, coffee in hand, jacket slung over a chair. Eyes quiet and full of the steady calm Claire had noticed in him since their first mornings together. He sat opposite Claire without a question and watched her hands tremble as she unfolded a second Polaroid Ethan had dropped when he left the building. Claire showed Noah the photo. He did not say anything at once. His silence was an action. Noah, Claire, and her voice held a new steadiness. Someone put these in my home. Someone knows when I am alone. Noah laid his hand flat on the wooden table between them. His fingers were warm from the takeaway cup. Then we find out who made them, he said. His words were small, practical. He suggested a shop, a time, a question list. Sam at Evergreen. We go there now at the neon-lit print shop. The owner, Sam, recognized the stock immediately. He took a Polaroid from Claire and pressed the corner beneath his thumbnail. Same stock we sell to local artists for portfolios, he said. But this type of glossy, thick paper. Someone ordered a run last Tuesday. Said they'd been collecting old pictures to reprint for a portfolio. Paid cash. Sam's voice was blunt and factual. He named a man he remembered. Victor Hale, who came in with a briefcase and a watch that caught the light. Claire's pulse shifted again. Confusion narrowed into a cold fear. The second emotion shift moved her from confused to frightened. Victor Hale was a name she had heard at Ethan's company parties. The kind of man who spoke in numbers and made introductions with a hand on a small of the back. His name connected Ethan's workplace world to the photos left on her threshold. Claire felt the ground of privacy give way. Noah watched Claire and Sam trade details. He wrote the address of Hale's office on a receipt with a neat block of pen strokes. We do this carefully, he said. We call Detective Alvarez if we find anything that looks like a pattern. The word detective made Claire's stomach tighten. Calling the police felt like admitting she could not solve this alone, but letting it fester felt worse. That night the house was quiet until the sound of glass against tile woke Claire. She moved through the dark with a single thought. Get to the living room, check the entry, look for the obvious sign of theft. The lamp was askew. Drawers stood open. A napkin lay on the coffee table with a symbol drawn in ballpoint. The curved V with a line through it Claire had seen once on a folded note in Chapter 4's photograph. Claire's hands shook enough to betray her. She dialed no, voice clipped. No arrived within 10 minutes, shoes scuffing the stair, jacket peeled off and laid across the back of a chair. He moved with careful efficiency, checking for prints, lining up the napkin beside the Polaroids, photographing the scene with his phone at various angles. He touched the lamp with his left hand. No smudges here. The camera angle in the prints matches the lamp position. Whoever took the photo staged them from the same corner 2 nights in a row. He spoke in motions rather than guesses. They chased the pattern into Victor Hale's orbit. Ethan admitted, reluctantly, that Hale's company had contracted with an outside marketing consultant who sometimes handled unusual requests. I work with a lot of vendors. Claire. Hale hires people you don't to see at parties. He hires quiet people. Ethan, when she confronted him in a glass-fronted lobby that smelled of citrus and office cleaner. But I didn't tell them about your apartment. I didn't. He kept his hands in his pockets. He did not ask to touch her hand. Then who did? Ethan. Claire. Her question was both demand and test. Who used your contacts to put a picture of my kitchen in a mailbox? Ethan looked at a window. I done to know. I swear I don't know. But I heard Victor talk about surveillance as leverage. He thinks leverage speeds deals. He mentioned collecting test assets once when he laughed at a party. He exhaled a short, broken breath. This admission shifted the frame. Ethan moved from suspect to possible conduit, and then to someone who might be used by a larger manipulator. Claire's reaction was complex, relief that Ethan might not be the architect, and a new anger toward Victor for crossing a line into her home. No stood by the doorway watching Ethan. If Hale's involved, we need more than confrontation. No, we need witnesses. We need the print records formally tied to him. They found a lead at Hale's Riverside warehouse. No, and Claire arranged a supposedly neutral meeting to draw whoever organized the photos into the open. Claire set the time, told Ethan she expected the truth, and asked No to wait in the car. She wanted to face whatever came with as much autonomy as she could hold. The plan unraveled when Victor Hale arrived with a lean man at his side and the warehouse lights low and humming. He did not begin with threats. He started with a smile that was too wide. "Ms. Bennett," he said, hands open in a theatrical gesture, "I admire your resilience." "Ethan, you were complicated." He the last word with an amused patience that made Claire step forward. "Why did you send photos to my home?" Claire demanded. Her pulse hammered so loud she could hear it in her teeth. She kept her voice short. Ethan watched from the shadows. No eased forward until his shoulder nearly touched Claire as Victor's smile narrowed. "Those were not meant to frighten you. They were leverage, business leverage. A reminder to certain people that personal details make negotiation easier." He folded his hands on the table and named prices for emails and meetings in the same sentence. "You understand leverage, Ms. Bennett?" he asked. Ethan stepped in. He used a contractor to get photos. "I didn't know who it was. I didn't want this." Ethan's words came fast. "Raw, Victor, tell her who ordered the prints at your instruction. Tell her why this matters to you." The warehouse air felt metallic and close when Ethan spoke, and for the first time in months his voice sounded like a plea. Victor's eye flicked to Ethan. Then the lean man at Victor's side moved. He reached toward Claire with a quickness meant to intimidate. No reacted on instinct. He grabbed the intruder's wrist, twisting until the man hissed and recoiled. Then No shoved him into a stacked crate. The crates toppled, a lamp shattered. The sudden crash cut the room into two, before and after. No pushed the man to the concrete. Claire took that moment to run for the open doorway. Victor cursed and stepped toward her. Ethan lunged as if to block him. The confrontation became physical, messy, and immediate. Fists, a shove, a spilled crate of printed portfolios that scattered like evidence across the floor. Claire grabbed one of the portfolios and found a receipt with Hale's name inked on the top. She pressed it into Ethan's hands and held him there, forcing his eyes to meet hers. In the scuffle, a phone fell and powered on, broadcasting a short video Victor must have taken inside Claire's kitchen. The image showed the lamp, the table, the napkin with the curve V. Claire's breathing shortened into controlled gasps. The video was proof, not speculation. The small screen became a witness. The quiet after the crash lasted only long enough for a siren to begin somewhere downriver. Someone had called from outside. Maya Sam, or a delivery driver, had seen lights and decided to call. Detective Alvarez arrived with 2 officers, uniforms crisp beneath the bleak warehouse lights. He was 38, with a careful voice and eyes that catalogued bruises and receipts the way others catalogue furniture. "Hands where I can see them," he said. He Claire for her statement, and then Ethan Ez. He photographed the fallen crates, the napkin, the video, and the portfolio receipt in methodical, workmanlike sequences. Victor tried to speak quickly, to smooth the timeline with practiced phrases about miscommunication and misguided contractors. Detective Alvarez listened and then asked for the contractor's name. Victor's answer slipped. He named a middleman, a local fixer with ties to his company. The detective's pen paused and then wrote it down. The epsilon of doubt in Victor's expression that no one noticed earlier had become a key crack. It showed motive and a chain of direction. At the police station, Claire watched while Detective Alvarez read back the details and told her what an officer would record. She signed statements, pointed to the napkin, and gave the address where the prints had been ordered. She watched Ethan from across the table the way a person watches an object they half understand. Ethan's shoulders had slumped low and his face looked like the inside of a tired hand. No waited in the lobby and offered small reassurances. A cup of vending machine coffee, a quiet question, a factual plan. We have the receipt, the video, and Sam's testimony, he said. We press charges. We get a restraining order. We make sure this stops. He did not say grand things about healing. He the actions that would make the stalking stop. Claire felt another emotion shift there, fear to a focused steadiness. The energy moved from wild worry into list, making and signature lines. Each signed form was both a wound and a stitch. It hurt to put the facts on paper, but the papers bound the danger into a shape the law could examine. Detective Alvarez closed a folder and looked at Claire with a plain, procedural kindness. Ms. Bennett, we will detain Victor Hale for questioning. We will take the prints and the portfolio receipts. We need you to be available for follow-up. Do you want someone to accompany you home tonight? He slid a card across the table with his direct contact number in block letters. Claire thought of the napkin on her coffee table and the lamp's position and the way her kitchen had felt violated. She thought of Ethan's apologies and Victor's calm smiles. She thought of Maya's practical observations and Sam's blunt memory. She thought of Noah's hand on the table, steady as a rail. In the end, she said the only practical thing she could. I want Noah to come with me. Noah's mouth eased into something like a soft nod. He stood, and the three of them left the station together. Outside, the sky had lightened into a blue that tasted of cold metal. Noah walked at Claire's pace. He did not reach for her hand until she stopped at a crosswalk and turned to him. Will you come by tomorrow? She asked. It was not a demand. It was the small test she gave anyone who wanted to move closer. I'll be there. No. His voice was even and a little raw. I'll be here when you want coffee, when you want silence. And when you want to go after someone who crossed that line. His promises came as actions. He had already started a list of practical steps in his head. Spoke them once, and then promised with his presence. They returned to the cafe the next morning, after the police had taken statements, and Hale's men had been held for questioning. The city had an early hush, and the cafe smelled of fresh bread and the slow hiss of milk steaming. Detective Alvarez had given Claire a number for victim services and a reference number for the case. She signed a final sheet and slid it across the counter to him like a closing gesture. Ethan sent a message while she waited for her coffee. I didn't intend any of this, I'm sorry. Claire read it and did not respond. The phone felt heavy in her hand, an object that had facilitated evidence and betrayal alike. She folded it into her pocket and let No speak first. You did well at the warehouse. No. He meant it as praise for how she had forced the moment to end publicly, how she had held Victor accountable without collapsing into hysteria. You questions. You kept looking for documents instead of getting dragged into a fight. Claire laughed once, a short surprised sound. I didn't feel very brave, she said. I felt like I had to pick the best option in a set of bad ones. No shrugged. Bravery looks like choices sometimes. And like asking for help, she watched him pour sugar into the cup, the way his hand opened and closed, and realized she believed his steadiness. It was not a blaze. It was a sequence of small, reliable acts. That belief settled into a steadier shape, relief threaded with caution. Over the next days, Detective Alvarez called with updates. Hale had been questioned, receipts tied him to the order, and the contractor admitted to taking the photos on commission. Victor's legal defense attempted to paint the contractor as a rogue freelancer. The investigation kept moving in incremental, concrete steps. subpoenas, statements, scheduled hearings. Claire remained involved and practical. She met with victim services, agreed to a temporary restraining order, and changed her locks. In private moments, Claire measured what had changed. She kept the gold locket she always wore safe under her shirt. She replaced the napkin on her coffee table with a small stack of plain coasters and a mug that read local roast. An ordinary object that now anchored the reality of her kitchen. She found it easier to breathe when the mug was full. Ethan reached out one last time at the hearing when he appeared as a witness. He stood voice steady and said, "I never meant to hurt Claire. I failed to see how my acquaintances could use what I thought were distant connections." He looked at her directly then, and for the first time he did not look away. His admission did not heal what had been broken, but Claire recognized the factual, public acknowledgement. She had needed that. She nodded once and left the courtroom without speaking to him. Noah walked her to the car afterward. He set a hand briefly at the small of her back, an offer of presence rather than comfort. "You made the right decisions," he said. "Keeping records and getting the police involved, that's what will keep you safe." Claire folded the last photograph into the file and then slid the file into the envelope Detective Alvarez had given her. The envelope had the case number written in blue ink. She held it with both hands for a second in the quiet of the back seat. Her fingers were steady. At the CAF the following morning she pushed the folder across to Detective Alvarez when he stopped by to finalize a few statements. "This is everything I have," she said, placing the Polaroids, the napkin, the receipt, and a short note she'd written listing dates and times. "If you need more, call me." Her voice was plain. Detective Alvarez nodded and tucked the documents into an evidence bag. "We'll take it from here, Ms. Bennett. You did exactly what you needed to do." He gave a small, workmanlike smile and a card with his direct extension. The practical, final action of handing over the evidence felt like a close. The items that had threatened her were now catalogued and stored under law. Noah waited outside with 2 coffees and a careful patience. Claire slid into the booth and let the warmth soak into her palms. She unbuttoned the collar of her coat, loosened the scarf, and let the routine of an ordinary morning settle around her. It was not a triumph. It was a deliberate choice to resume small things. The way she folded her sleeve, the way she read the menu, the way she allowed a man to sit across from her without demanding everything be decided at once. Noah placed his hand over hers without forcing it. "Do you want to go through the boxes together?" he asked. His question was practical. "Will you let me help you organize the paperwork? Will you let me be part of the daily tasks that feel like care?" It was an offer for presence rather than drama. Claire nodded. She thought of the long hours she had spent building walls around herself. She thought of the locket at her throat and the small dimple that appeared when she smiled. She reached out and squeezed Noah's hand. A small, decisive pressure. "Yes," she said. Tomorrow morning, they discussed moving forward the way 2 people plan a simple route. Locks first, then a restraining order update, then a meeting with a counselor recommended by victim services. Each item was a step. Each step was concrete. At noon, Detective Alvarez called to say Victor Hale would be charged and that the contractor had cooperated. The legal process would be long, he warned. Claire listened and made a note to attend the initial hearing. She pocketed the phone and looked at Noah. "I want to be involved in the hearing," she said. Her voice did not carry melodrama. It carried a clean decision. "No, nothing for a beat," then smiled with a small, private warmth. "I'll be there," he said. "I'll sit where you want me to sit." He meant it. He had already begun to make room in his days for the practical presence Claire needed. That night she put the final Polaroid into a labeled envelope, wrote the date on it, and sealed it with a strip of clear tape. She slid into a kitchen drawer and closed it slowly. The drawer made a small, ordinary click. When Clara turned off the kitchen light, she did not feel the dramatic uplift some books promise. She felt a quiet that belonged to a room someone had locked and then re-entered with the keys in hand. There was no rhetorical finish. There was only the physical act of closing a drawer and the knowledge that concrete steps had been taken. She stood in the doorway, keys in hand, and said, "No, come with me upstairs." No rose and followed her up the stairwell. At the top of the stairs he paused and took a breath, as if readying for a long walk rather than a small gesture. He reached for the knob and opened Claire's apartment door. She stepped inside and set the sealed evidence envelope on the table. Then, without a speech, she sat down opposite him and folded her hands around a steaming cup of tea. Detective Alvarez's card sat beside her spoon like another practical anchor. Claire had arrived at a conclusion that bore no fireworks. She would press charges, continue to cooperate, and accept Noah's quiet companionship. The decision was not a surrender of independence. It was a selection of practical allies and a steadying of her days. She looked up at No, and the small dimples at the corners of her mouth deepened. "Tomorrow," she said. No nodded and reached across the table to squeeze her hand. "Tomorrow," he echoed. The concrete beat came again. A plan for the next day, a promise held in simple presence. Claire folded the ear of her scarf around her fingers and let the warmth of the cup steady her. She had made the choice to trust one person with her mornings, and she had handed the evidence that had threatened her life to the people who could make it stop. When Detective Alvarez collected the envelope the next morning and placed it into evidence, Claire watched the clerk seal the chain and said to herself the only thing she needed. This happened, it is recorded, and the next steps will be practical. She left the station holding Noah's arm and walked into the bright ordinary day, aware of every step and glad for the weight of a straightforward choice. Claire closed the folder, pushed it across the table to Detective Alvarez, and stood. That action ended the chapter. The documents were in official hands, the man behind the photos faced charges, and she chose a cautious, deliberate companionship with No that began with coffee and paperwork rather than declarations.